When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, hello YouTube, welcome back to the Grease Garbage YouTube channel. Today's video, we are going to be doing my top 10 best A Song of Ice and Fire characters. Now, this is going to be a lot different than my top 10 favorite. I've done a video on that before. So before we get into the actual list, I want to set up some things to kind of define why I have these top 10 characters and why they're ranked the way they are. Now, this is going to be kind of similar to my top 10, not my top 10, but my top 30, whatever, how many there were, POV characters, where this is how I'm going to rank the characters in Song of Ice and Fire. I limited them down to 10. I'm not going to do honorable mentions. There's just too many you could put on this list. And before you even see my list, tell me what your guys' list is going to be. And here is how I'm judging these characters. One, I guess screen time. I don't know what you would say for book like versions of it, so like I guess book time. How much time do we spend with this character, or how much time are they part of a chapter for a POV character? Because there are notably three characters on this list that never get a POV chapter, but they're on this list. Now, another thing I want to talk about when ranking these characters is going to be how impactful to the story are they, right? So how much influence do they have on the plot and kind of the things that go on, and if this character does like die or something, what is their lasting effect on the story? So I did that as well, and I also wanted to kind of bring into effect kind of how intriguing of a character they are as well, right? So do we have a really good character arc with this character, or do we have an intriguing character that's already been well established, but we get to see their backstory and learn more about why they are who they are. So before we get into the video, if you guys like to like, subscribe, and comment, please do. It helps the channel grow. Each people that might like this content as well. And let's get into it. So those are mostly how I'm doing this list. I'm trying to be pretty objective. If you watch my top 10 favorite characters, it'll be very different from the way this list is going to be formatted. But yeah, I try to be as objective as possible. I know I have a certain bias because I just like certain characters and I think the arcs are very good. But yeah, I just wanted to say that. So let me know who you guys would have in your top 10 and let's get into it. So number 10, I had Cersei. Now, again, like I said, right, Cersei is a character that, again, is with us from book 1 all the way to book 5. Now, she's not a POV character, so we don't get to see inside of her head and really until book 4, but she is one of our main antagonists, and I think the reason you can put her on here and make it justified is that Cersei is a very interesting character, right? We don't see a lot of female characters in power, and we see how Cersei, all of her like motives are driven towards trying to protect her children and protect kind of herself because of the prophecy in her younger years. And we see how that mentally takes its effect on her and how she is such a kind of horrible person, but you almost feel bad for her in the regard of what she's doing and how stupid she really is. But yeah, Cersei to me is a character that you love to hate, you know, and she definitely is on her way to the Mad Queen. She has a big impact on the story if we look at kind of King's Landing, everything going on there, and how she is even setting up Winds of Winter with how badly she's been ruling so far. And yeah, I mean, I think there's a bunch of characters you can throw on this list, but to me, Cersei, I felt like deserved to at least be in the top 10. Now, number 9 I have is Theon. Now, Theon is on this list based upon, I think he has probably a top 3 character arc in the entire story. I also think we spend a bunch of time with Theon, and I think he has a big impact on the story. Think about how different Robb's campaign had been if he still had the backing of the North, right? If he didn't have to kind of worry about going back north, instead of having to go back through the bridge with Walder Frey, who knows would have been played out differently in that scenario. So I think Theon definitely has a big impact on the story, and we even see him helping take Catelyn back in Dance with Dragons. So I think Theon again has a very strong impact. Not as much as I would say most of the characters on this list. I say if you ranked the characters on actual impact on the story, importance to the plot, he's probably on the lower end of all the characters on the list. But again, I think very intriguing character, as well as he to me has one of the best character arcs as we see him from book 1, and then we get book 2, and he has some POV chapters in there as well. And we really see Theon and who he is and how he starts to kind of regret the decisions he makes towards the end of that book. I talk a lot about that in my Clash of Kings review I did last week. And then to see him kind of after a while come back and he is just mutilated, he's not the same person. And we try to see him starting to kind of find his way into being a person again. It's really great character building, and I think Theon definitely deserves to be on the list. Now, number 8 is Littlefinger. So we have a lot to talk about with this character placement, because I'm also going to talk about another character because they're very similar. But getting into why Littlefinger is at number 8, Littlefinger to me is the most impactful of any character on the list to the actual plot and story. He's a very intriguing character with his background with Brandon Stark and Catelyn and Lysa, and he is the one basically letting the whole story happen, right? He is the one manipulating events to where the War of the Five Kings happen. He is manipulating the Purple Wedding. He's making all this chaos that the story itself could not happen without Littlefinger. So for me, Littlefinger needed to be on the list for impact. Now also, Littlefinger again does not have any POV chapters, but Littlefinger is given a decent amount of time, right? He's part of the he is part of the small council meetings in book 1 with Ned, has a big influence there, as we all know. This continues into kind of book 2, and then book 3 he kind of disappears for a while and then makes an appearance at the end with Sansa. And then book 4 we really get to see how he manipulates people, how he kind of takes over the Vale, and it's really great storytelling. Now, with this being said, you know, he's not a POV character. We don't spend the most amount of time with him. Out of all the characters on here, probably spend the least amount of time with Littlefinger, which is something that definitely holds him back for me. But another character I wanted to talk about because Littlefinger is on here at number 8 is Varys. Now, people might put Varys on their top 10, or if because I put Littlefinger I should put Varys. I don't think Varys should be on the list because Varys's plans have not really happened yet. We haven't seen a lot of Varys' plans succeed, right? We know Varys is plotting. We know he's doing all these things, but none of it's really made a difference yet, in my opinion. So, and that's my big thing with Winds of Winter. I talked about this a lot in Varys videos, or I did a Tyreek Lannister video, or an Edric Storm video, where I talk about, I think Varys has a lot of moving pieces that are all going to collide in the next book with Aegon coming over and him probably taking the Iron Throne, that Varys very easily can make this list after the next book. Because I think Littlefinger's had all of his great moments so far in these first few books, whereas Varys, I think all of his pieces are going to come into place in this next book. But that is why I have Littlefinger at number 8. Now, number 7, you guys know my favorite character is Stannis, but I do think he deserves to be on the list. I think he is a very morally complex and one of the most interesting characters to really kind of figure out why they are who they are. Why is Stannis someone that is cold, where he's very no enjoyment in his life? And Renly's Peach in that way is one of the best chapters when we explore Stannis's character. Even, you know, Maester Crescent, when we're talking about Stannis and how he is as a character, where he's always felt like Robert has never given him what he's deserved or the love or respect that he deserves. And Stannis, to me, impacts the plot heavily with saving the wall, and, you know, even more into Winds of Winter, where he'll be doing some stuff up in the north as well. Stannis also is the one, you know, responsible for killing Renly, which is a massive thing because Renly would have easily won the war probably if Stannis doesn't kill him, or I guess Mel, but you know, Stannis was part of it, you know. And I think Stannis, his relationship with both Davos and Mel, it's a really great situation where we have kind of the devil being Mel and the angel kind of being Davos on Stannis' shoulders, and he has to weigh those decisions. And we see Stannis kind of grow as a character, where Stannis towards, you know, dance and all that starts to kind of, he is still someone that is very, you know, firm in his values and is someone very that doesn't really like to like make compromises. But he does make compromises, right? He does start to make compromises to try and put himself in a better spot, which is something, if we look at Maester Crescent's chapter, Stannis is just unwilling to compromise on anything, right? Where nothing. He will not compromise on a single thing. Where Stannis, I would say at the end of Dance, has started to at least do some sort of compromises. Not a lot. He's still the same character, but he's starting to kind of, you know, learn a little bit and kind of try to make friends, I guess. But I think Stannis deserves to be here. He does have a big influence on the story, like I've said a couple times, and also, you know, he is kind of prevalent. You know, we do see him in quite a few chapters from Davos's point of view, and even hearing about him, right? He has a big reputation from a lot of the rest of Westeros being a very big military commander, and kind of just his history in general. So that is number 7. Now, number 6, this is going to be our last not POV chapter character, and that is going to be Tywin. I don't think you can really make a list without Tywin being in the top 10. Tywin, again, a very prominent character, and he really is the master player of the game, in my opinion, right? Littlefinger right there as well, but Tywin, to me, is the guy that should have been king that never really was, and we just see how his influence and how much he impacts the story as he's able to orchestrate the Red Wedding of our main protagonists of Robb and Catelyn, and how he's able to make alliances and strengthen his family's position. Like, when you're looking at it, where if Tyrion dies, right, you know, he's killed, Tywin lives on, and let's say he's not poisoned. I go back and forth on that theory if Tywin was poisoned, but I'm not sure on it. But when you look at where Tywin put his family at, and how after the War of the Five Kings was kind of over, Tywin really had fixed the kingdoms until a couple events happen where, you know, Oberyn ends up dying, and Tywin ends up dying, and Cersei starts destroying alliances. Tywin had put his family in a very good position, and we look at how much Tywin's death, you know, figures into the rest of Westeros, right? Stannis is able to gain support from other people like the Iron Bank, like, you know, not even gaining support, but allowing that there be a chance that Stannis to, you know, win, right? And because Tywin's dead. And if you look at Aegon, the reason Aegon decides, you know, to invade with Tyrion's advice is because, again, you have a boy king on the throne and Cersei's screwing everything up. You see how much Tywin's death really impacts the story, and how much of just a major character he really is in the story. So that, to me, is why Tywin is deservedly number 6. Now, getting into our top 5. Now, number 5 I have as Arya. So Arya, again, big character, right, where she has some of the most POV chapters in all of the books. We spend a ton of time with her, and she has one of the best character arcs in the story, as well as just world building and kind of showing us the other side of the Catelyn chapters, where, you know, Catelyn is just kind of overlooking war and, you know, all this stuff. Arya's in the middle of it, right? She's seeing how destroyed, you know, towns are being, or how badly this is going on the common people, and Arya slowly losing her family, and Arya trying to find meaningful connections with people and to really just have them blow up in her face, right? We see this with Hot Pie and Gendry. Eventually they both end up leaving her, basically, and Yoren ends up dying. Everyone around Arya just either dies or leaves her, and it's a very tragic story. And we see how her going to Braavos and trying to become a faceless man, and her struggling to kind of get rid of her identity as a Stark. She really has some of the best, you know, character arcs in the entire story. And she, to me, is the adventure character of all the characters in the story, right? Where some always kind of they're there for a reason, right? Tyrion is like our main kind of King's Landing POV for book 2 and book 3, and he is a major source of the political game going on. You have Jon, who it's kind of like discovering more about the White Walkers and kind of everything going on past the wall and all that stuff. You have Dani and Essos and all her stuff, kind of the more magic side of the story, where Arya is just kind of the adventure, right? Where we go from place to place to place. She goes all over the place, and I think Arya deserves to be at the number 5 spot. So number 4, this is where I said, you know, my favorites don't really apply to this list. I have Dani at number 4. She is not, I don't think she was even on my favorites list. She might have been an honorable mention. I don't think she was even on the list, though. But I cannot sit here and deny that Dani is one of the best characters in the books. When you look at her kind of story and where she starts at and where she ends, she is such a very strong character arc, where she starts out as a girl where she's very innocent, very shy, doesn't have much confidence, and we see by the end of book 1 where she's kind of turned into, you know, she is the dragon. She is someone that's completely different with more confidence, leading people, and you only see that, you see that build and how she's, you know, smart, but she kind of plays dumb, where she's like, I'm only a little girl, not wise in the ways of war or whatever. You see how she kind of starts to do those things, and she's still learning, right? Where, you know, in Marine, she does not do a great job, and she is someone that I think if George wants to go the Daenerys mad route, which I don't know if I like for the books, but if he does end up going that way, you know, you could maybe point to a couple things so far in the story so far that are really kind of impactful in her story. Now, the one thing I will say about Dani that I think kind of puts her down this list a bit is she's not the most impactful character in the story, right? If you take Daenerys out, what really changes in mainland Westeros, right? Like, nothing really changes. Like, there's a couple characters where it's like, okay, if Barristan wasn't with Dani, maybe he's with Stannis or Renly. I mean, who knows? But again, because this is the thing, which I think is hilarious, is that in book 1, Dani was actually kind of supposed to be her own little thing. It wasn't supposed to be her actually involved in Game of Thrones, which I think is interesting, because it makes a lot of sense for me, because when I watch the show or I read the books, Dani always feels like a side plot from the main story. Now, we know it's going to, like, converge at the end, or however you want to say it. But at the moment, she's not the most impactful character, but you can't deny she has a great story, character arc from where she is at the beginning of book 1 to the end of book 5, and just the dragons. I mean, nobody's seen dragons in Westeros for hundreds of years. So, again, you have to put Dani at least on your top 10, especially looking at the future when she will be very impactful. But for now, again, feels kind of like a side story. Number 3 is going to be Jon. Now, I wrestled with number 2 and number 3 for quite some time, but number 3 is going to be Jon. I think, oh, it's tough. I think Jon, again, is in your top 3 for character arcs. He is someone that starts book 1 being a kind of not knowing where his place is, right? We see this with a couple characters in book 1 where they're trying to figure out who they are as a person. And Jon always being kind of conflicted with, you know, love, should he help his family, or duty, the Night's Watch, or Ygritte and kind of his happiness and love, or the Night's Watch. And that's constantly in play book through book, and it kind of comes to a head in book 5 when Jon is kind of has the decision where it's like, do I go south and march on Winterfell and try to take back my family home and kind of defend the Night's Watch or whatever, or do I just stay at the Night's Watch and kind of continue to keep my vows? And we see how he chooses, and eventually it bites him in the ass. So in that point of view, Jon has a great story. He's a very intriguing character. We still don't know his backstory. He has like a mystery. There's always that mystery looting where who are Jon's parents? And Jon's story is very impactful, right? He is the one character that is going to have a lot of knowledge on the White Walkers, where he's, you know, sending Sam to try and get more information on this stuff. So when you look at it from that point of view, with Jon also kind of helping Stannis as well, we don't know where that's going to go. But I think Jon is a character that really has got to be in your top 5. I really can't see you putting Jon outside the top 5, but to me, Jon, a fantastically written character and one of my favorites. So number 2 is going to be Jaime. Of course, Jaime's on here. He has the best character arc of the entire story. Hugely impactful when we look at him getting captured at the Whispering Wood, then being released, which is a big turning point for the Starks, where it's like, okay, now you don't have a hostage, so Tywin can kind of start rolling in these plans. He loses his hand. It's Jamie going through all of this kind of suffering and pain and trying to figure out who he is. Whereas like a bunch of characters have this in book 1, where they're trying to figure out what they are, who they are, what's their value in society. Jamie has that in book 3. Jamie is very much trying to figure out who he is as a character. And when we finally get to the point where Jamie leaves King's Landing and he's on his own, he's really, it feels like Jamie is where he needs to be, at the head of the military. He's very good at it. He's learned from a lot of his mistakes. And when we finally get to the point where Jamie's like, you know, not going back to Cersei, the letter comes through. Great storytelling again. And Jamie, to me, it's very difficult for me to see him outside the top 4 or 5 as well. And again, releasing Tyrion, another huge thing that leads to so much else, other shit with Tywin and all that stuff. So again, I think Jamie really needs to be on the list. Now, coming in at number 1, I think this one just makes the most sense. Tyrion, to me, is probably one of the most intriguing characters in the entire story. He has a very deep character arc as well, and just everything with Tyrion to me is really great. And I think a lot of people like to kind of badger on his later book and Dance, but I think it makes so much sense the way Tyrion reacts, right? And if you read book 3 and then kind of go into book 5 and you just have that fresh in your mind, Tyrion should be this way. The only person that has ever really loved him was brutally raped by a ton of dudes. Tyrion was lied to that she, you know, he didn't actually think, you know, he thought she was just a whore, right? And when we look at Tyrion's main problem, if we look at Tyrion where he's a character that is always feeling lonely, that never can be good enough for anyone or is never loved, it's just a gut wrench when we get the reveal that Jamie lied to Tyrion. And when you go into those later books, Tyrion having a major overhaul kind of in character makes sense. Tyrion should feel that way. He's killed his father, someone that he believed, you know, he had feelings for in Shay, and he's found out that the woman that, you know, he loved, he basically watched her get raped and stuff like that. So Tyrion, a very strong character. His influence in all of the books, really, and his impact in the entire series is felt everywhere through, right? He is the one that's accused of Joffrey, or he's the one basically accused of killing Joffrey. He kills Tywin, which again, like I've said, it's a major event. He's the one that is able to stop Stannis from instantly taking King's Landing when pretty much any other character, the city would have fallen. And Tyrion, not only all of those things, is probably one of the most entertaining characters to read, and he is on screen, or, you know, book chapters, whatever, a lot. I think he is number 1. It's either him or I believe Jon who have the most POV chapters, and it just makes sense for me with where Tyrion is at as a character and where he's come from book 1 to book 5. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. This was a very difficult list to actually make. And let me know if I forgot somebody or if you guys think I should have put somebody in here. But yeah, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.
If you think this has a happy ending, you haven't been paying attention.